This film series has been produced so as to form part of or complement the training manual required to be carried on board your ship, in accordance with the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, Chapter 3. The first 3 parts of this film series dealt with the methods of abandoning a ship. In this film, we're going to look at the techniques of survival in lifeboats and life rafts on the open sea. It cannot be stressed too strongly that your ship is your best lifeboat. Abandonment should only be considered as a last resort and only undertaken on orders from the captain. It is important that evacuees should put on extra clothing and, if possible, head protection before evacuation and make every effort to keep dry. Once a survival craft has been launched, the priorities are to get away from the ship, congregate with other survival craft, and stream the sea anchor. In order to conserve body fluid, everyone, without exception, must take anti-seasick pills. If there is more than one survival craft, they should be secured together. This is one of the tasks of the motor-powered boats.
Right.
Whatever the circumstances, once they are away from the ship, the evacuees will have time to consider their next actions. They must always plan on being in the survival craft for many days. Swift rescue cannot be guaranteed, even in busy shipping lanes. Evacuees must prepare to be primitive. Social niceties are not a priority in survival situations. There are 4 principal dangers to be faced. First, drowning, which is fatal in minutes. Second, the inability to maintain body temperature. This will be fatal in hours. Third, lack of water, which takes a few days to cause death. And fourth, lack of food. This only becomes a threat to life after several weeks. Their priorities are then, first, to protect themselves against drowning and exposure. Secondly, to help rescue services locate them. And thirdly, to conserve their water and food supplies. These priorities are often summarized as protection, location, water and food.
Right, I want everybody to check for leaks. Rub your hands over the buoyancy chambers, all around the raft, including the arch over the top.
Protection from drowning is provided by the survival craft, so it is essential that its condition is kept under constant watch with regular inspections. Protection from exposure poses different problems in different climates. In hot climates, the sun's heat accelerates the loss of body fluids. This can lead to dehydration and even death by an increase in body temperature, heat stroke. Exposure covers are vital for lifeboats. They can be cooled down by wetting them with seawater, as can life raft canopies. If necessary, evacuees can wet their clothes in the morning, wear them damp, and dry them before nightfall. Once the exposure cover is rigged, evacuees must move as little as possible in order to reduce water loss by sweating. To increase ventilation, the sides can be opened up, sea conditions permitting. The problems of protection against exposure are more acute in cold climates. Adequate shelter and clothing are essential to reduce heat loss. If heat loss is not reduced, the body cannot generate sufficient heat to maintain itself. The consequence is hypothermia. Unless suitable action is taken, first survivors lose the use of their hands, then limbs. Incapacity is followed by apathy, loss of consciousness, and finally, death. Clothes insulate the body. The material traps the heat by means of tiny air pockets. This insulation is reduced drastically by strong wind, and even more so by water. As the heat loss in water is 26 times that in air at the same temperature, it follows that if clothes become wet, their insulating effect is lost. So wet clothes must be removed and wrung as dry as possible before being put on again. In a cold wind, a person wearing wet clothes, depending on their composition and number of layers, is worse off than someone who is naked and dry. The life raft entrances must be closed. Evacuees must make every effort to stay dry and to keep each other warm. This is where the value of extra clothing will be realized. Any water inside must be bailed out using the bailer and sponge. Keep one sponge free from salt water to collect condensation from the inside of the canopy or exposure cover.
Right, we're now going to inflate the floor of the raft. So can you get the pump out of that bag? Pass it over to him. Now connect it to the tap on the floor.
Once dry, the floor must be inflated in cold climates or in cold water conditions. Occupants should huddle together in such a way that the stability of their craft is not adversely affected. The survival chances of evacuees will depend upon their training, their equipment, and their mental attitude, that is, their will to live.
Right, you can now take your life jackets off and sit on them. Okay?
This will be greatly influenced by the leadership shown by those in charge of the survival craft. Strength of mind will often be more important than strength of body. The shipwrecked mariners may have to deal with delayed shock, hypothermia, and overwhelming feelings of depression, confusion, despair, and possibly panic. Life jackets and thermal protective aids should be used to insulate the evacuees and so prevent heat loss.
Right, I want you to read these instructions and you act as the first inside lookout, check the condition of the raft and make sure everybody's okay.
The minority who find that they can act positively must assert themselves.
And I want you to relieve
Keep
the
people
outside-
occupied and organized into a team. The survival manual has a useful list of things to do. Watches should be established with one inside lookout and one outside watchkeeper as a minimum. They must be maintained on a 24-hour basis. Changeovers should be frequent, particularly for the outside lookout.
You all right?
The inside watchkeeper keeps an eye on injured personnel and the state of the survival craft.
All right?
It's a good idea to have a regular roll call.
All right?
This helps ensure that the evacuees are not gradually succumbing to hypothermia or excess carbon dioxide. This can build up rapidly, and so the life raft will need to be vented regularly. The outside lookout keeps watch for rescue ships and aircraft, any survivors, and any useful wreckage. He or she will bear most of the responsibility for the second priority, location. The EPIRB and emergency radio will help summon the rescue services. Nevertheless, the outside lookout may well see them before they see the survival craft. That is when the pyrotechnics should be used, only when potential rescuers are in sight. Read the instructions carefully before use. The general rule is parachute flares for ships and aircraft at night, and smoke canisters for both in daylight. Hand flares are for short-range signalling only.
Right, here's the heliograph. Take it out of the pack and try to learn how to use it.
Another means of signalling is the heliograph. This simple device for reflecting the sun has an effective range of at least 5 miles. The next priority is water supply. To readjust the body fluid balance, no water should be consumed in the first 24 hours, except by those who are seriously injured. The water provided should be supplemented by catching rainwater.
That little pipe there. Take the...
If it has come off the exposure cover or canopy, the first quantity of water must be discarded, as it will be salty and contaminated by dye and talcum powder. All water collected should be checked for palatability and discarded if it's unfit to drink. If rainwater or condensation is collected, drink this first and leave the sachets or cans of water for later on. In some circumstances, there will be large amounts of condensation. This should be collected with the salt-free sponge. Some survival craft have desalination kits, but these have only a limited life.
Hey, Skipper, I need to relieve myself.
OK, come on then.
Everyone should have a bowel movement within the first 24 hours, while they still have sufficient body fluid to lubricate it. In a survival craft, you will get to know well your fellow passengers.
Hang on to me.
After 24 hours, a water ration of 1/4 to ½ a litre minimum should be issued daily. It is recommended that the daily ration be issued in 3 equal parts, at sunrise, midday and sunset, to each survivor. The ration should be drunk slowly. Holding water in the mouth before swallowing helps to get the most value from it. Water is needed to remove salts from the body. Never drink seawater or urine, as these have the opposite effect and will kill you much faster than slow dehydration. With the reduced water intake, it is normal for urine to become very dark. Think carefully before you use any of the stores. They are all you have. No food should be consumed, except for the carbohydrate-based survival craft supplies, unless water is in plentiful supply. This is because proteins from birds and fish absorb water when digested. A well-nourished person can survive a month or so without food, so worry about the water rather than the food.
This is your biscuit ration. You just break off one small piece at a time, chew it very slowly, and then swallow. Don't waste anything.
Alcohol has no place in the treatment of hypothermia or in any survival situation. If any has been brought on board, it must be discarded. But keep the bottles for holding rainwater.
So I've had a smoke, Skip.
Yeah.
Smoking is likely to present a problem. It is a potential hazard to a life raft or lifeboat and unpleasant to non-smokers.
That's your third one.
It should be discouraged as it decreases peripheral circulation and so makes smokers more prone to immersion foot. If they insist on smoking, smokers must pool their cigarettes. Once the basic priorities of protection, location, water and food are under control, attention can turn to the care of the sick and injured. It is best left to those with specialist training. However, in the absence of skilled personnel, try to prevent bleeding and protect those suffering from shock or exposure. The first aid outfit includes bandages, antiseptic cream and pain-killing tablets. Shock is a state of collapse which may occur after any serious injury. Victims should be kept warm, laid flat, and, if conscious, given frequent sips of water, except for those with stomach injuries.
Just take it easy.
Immersion foot occurs when the temperature of parts of the body, usually the feet, remain very cold, but above freezing for long periods. The feet become white, numb, and slightly swollen. They must be carefully dried and warmed slowly.
Lift it up.
Do not massage the affected areas. Feet can be warmed by placing them under the armpits but outside the clothing of another evacuee. Frostbite is another hazard of low temperatures. The consequences can be severe. Survivors in freezing conditions must always be on the lookout for it in themselves and in others. This is why the outside lookout must be changed frequently and why warm headgear must be worn. Keep moving to encourage circulation, and if necessary, give massages. Small frozen areas can be thawed by applying a warm hand. Larger areas, such as feet, can be warmed by being placed in a companion's clothing.
Warming up.
The pain when circulation returns may be severe, and painkillers may be administered. Although being in a survival craft may be uncomfortable, you are far more likely to survive there than in the water. For those survivors who find themselves alone in the water, the priorities of protection and location remain the same. The big danger is heat loss. Unless the sea temperature is above 33 degrees centigrade or 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you will lose heat to the water. Do not swim unless absolutely necessary, as it wastes body heat. Present as small a surface area as sea conditions and your life jacket permit. Draw the knees up and tuck the arms into the sides. Use your collar to protect your neck. Best of all, take a woolly or hard hat with you. The neck and head are the areas of greatest heat loss. If there is more than one survivor in the water, they must keep as close to each other as sea conditions allow. This will break up wave motion, reduce heat loss, and make the survivors easier for the rescue services to see. They must not tie themselves together. At night, only one life jacket light needs to be on. The priorities in all survival situations are to maintain morale and the will to live, to keep warm and dry, and to conserve water supplies. It is also important to keep signaling aids at the ready. No one is a survivor until they have been rescued. You can survive anything except death itself.
This is the lifeboat transceiver broken down into its component parts. Clip aerial.
Make yourself familiar with the life-saving appliances on your vessel.
And also, this is an earthing.
Make sure you know your duties designated by the muster list.
Transmitter receiver is inert until such time as a hand-driven generator.
Study the ship's general emergency plan and, very importantly, participate positively in all training and drills. Abandonment of a ship is very rarely necessary, but it is a risk faced every day by those who go to sea. Only fools have no fear of the sea, and only fools do not prepare with good training and proper equipment to meet the worst possible eventualities. Maintain your life-saving equipment. You have a duty to yourself and to your colleagues in survival situations. Be certain that you can fulfill it. Read the training manual on your ship. See this film series again. Make sure that you will be properly prepared to deal with any emergency at sea.